One of the things that I think is interesting is that estrogen is used in the brain for energy utilization. So that's something that this is more, I think, like focused in that perimenopause, menopausal state, where we see the type of energy that is used in the brain shifts in that time. And so we'll have like it uses more of the ketones for energy as opposed to sugar. And if we have some of that insulin resistance, if we're having that, it's harder for us to switch our energy fuel, can see that fatigue in your brain.
Welcome to the Advanced Women's Health Podcast, where we empower women with the latest insights and advice on holistic health. From cutting-edge medical research to practical wellness tips, our mission is to help you thrive at every stage of life. Join us as we explore topics ranging from hormonal balance and reproductive health to nutrition and mental well-being. Whether you're seeking solutions for a specific health concern or simply want to enhance your overall wellness, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this journey to better health together. This is the Advanced Women's Health Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode with Dr. Ashley Stapleton. I am so excited to dive into today's episode, not just because Ashley has an amazing story that I am so excited to get into and is so passionate about naturopathic medicine, but because we are going to talk about the topics you all want to know about what the hell is happening to your brain. So we are clearly in a perimenopause moment on the podcast. It's a question that we get so much. People are so overwhelmed about the transitions that are happening in their life, wondering if they're perimenopausal, wondering if they have to suffer for the rest of their life feeling like this. And so we're diving into a variety of different topics. And today we're going to be diving in to all things brain health, but also all things what Ashley and myself talk about with our friends when we're sitting down and navigating where you're at in this phase of life. So, without further ado, let us dive in. Ashley, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into naturopathic medicine.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. I think that a lot of my colleagues got into naturopathic medicine through their own health journey, I think was a big one. I'd say for
Mhm.
myself, though, I kind of typical start. I was interested in medicine, kind of pursuing that in my undergrad. And in that time, I just lost interest in sort of the rat race of getting
Mhm.
into college and a medical program afterwards, and then the residency. And I just didn't see
Yeah.
myself spending the first almost half of my life working towards that. So I pursued something else. I wasn't too sure. I actually started my family. And when I was on my mat leave and I had my daughter, I was thinking about going back to my job. I wasn't super into the what I was doing at the time. I really spent some time looking into, what else could I be doing? And then since I did have that strong interest in medicine, in biology, just the human body, I was so fascinated by it. I was exploring these different pathways, and someone I met was a naturopathic doctor, and I talked to her a bit more, got a little bit more information about the career. And I'm like, this is too good to be true. I can't even believe this exists. And I hadn't heard about it before. And so while I was home taking care of her, I did a few of my prereqs for the program and then started the program. And while I was doing that, I also had a couple more of those four children. So that was definitely kept me busy, had to prioritize my cognitive health again during that time. I
Yeah.
know this is a side note, but I had a few children and had some comparisons to make. And my kids that I had in the program, I obviously didn't get to take a mat leave or take any time off. And I felt like my mood was like quite good. And I feel
Yeah.
like because I had this this need, this thing to push for, it made a
Yeah.
really big difference. Yeah. And I think that really ties into what we'll talk about today in terms of just sometimes with cognition, and we might go into ADHD also, but just how you
Yeah.
can feel a bit like you're spinning a wheel without anywhere to go. And having that structure of school was really beneficial for me just in that time.
You and I talked about that so many times, right? Like how critical structure and direction are for people's brains. And there are so many people with executive dysfunction or challenges with focus and attention or challenges with postpartum mood stuff that when they're directed towards something they're passionate about, they see those symptoms improve because there's that identity piece, right? When I had my oldest, I had pretty significant postpartum anxiety. I now can see that in hindsight, but I had the identity shift from like, I'm an independent ass woman who can do whatever I want to being a mom. It was also I had left my job, like the clinic I was at before, going on mat leave. My husband's company he was at had sold and bought him out. So we were like, the world's our oyster. So we moved to Kingston. But in that situation, right, you're in this place where like everything about my identity shifted and I had no grounding point. Whereas with my second kiddo, I had a business, I had Advanced Women's Health. We were building that. I had a team, I had a stable, everything I already identified as being a mom. And it was, yes, there's that intuition, there's knowing how to raise a kid, but it was just totally different because I had that thing I was passionate about that I was chasing in that moment.
Yeah. And which is interesting because on the surface, on the outside, you would think, oh, you have all this time and look at you, you have all this freedom. Like you should be as
Yeah.
relaxed and just able to go with it. But lots of times that isn't the case. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
women are like struggle with that. It's like I have what I need. I've given myself all this time. And sometimes those parameters and that scaffolding is so incredibly valuable with your mental health, with that cognitive piece.
Absolutely. And such a good point. And again, we're doing a bit of an aside here, but what's a good podcast without an aside? I have had so many patients recently who've sold their businesses. And so on paper, they're very successful. They have all the money they need to retire. They have sold their job. You know what I mean? Like they're sitting there and they're like, I have my house paid for. I have all my time. I have an investment bank, like blah, 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 blah. And they're coming to me and they're not okay and they can't get motivated and they can't structure their days to eat healthy and move their bodies. And it's actually the process of giving them back direction and passion that their health comes back online. And it's something that I have really worked a lot with in the last 12 months. And it's something that I have found so rewarding and something I've loved doing so much. I don't talk about it very much, but is having patients that you're just like supporting them back to themselves and what themselves is, that passion, whether it's they sold a business, they've retired, they have changed jobs, they're a mom. It's that moment of critical identity shift that is so vulnerable in so many ways, from a mental health perspective, from a cognitive perspective, from a motivation perspective. Um, it's just like it's a period of time I love being in with people because I'm like, anything is possible, right?
Yeah, I love that about this job in general is like, yes, we have to talk about what's going wrong with you. Let's look at all the
Yep.
pieces, but there is really that piece that is like, let's talk about your, overall life satisfaction and what motivates you and what your purpose is.
Yep.
And I love like I feel like you always are doing that really well. Like you're not afraid to go in there with people. You're like, I see an issue. I'm just gonna poke at it. I'm gonna just, does it hurt here? I'm just gonna poke at it.
That is the definition of me, right? Like no one gets
Yeah.
away with anything on my watch. It's
Yeah.
very much like we're just going to circle this drain because like we got to go down it, right? So like whatever it takes, however we have to get there, this is the thing. And
Yeah.
I think that is something that so many people push back against. But I think, especially in perimenopause and menopause, it is such a key thing because it's like there are three key factors that are messing up how people feel. And they may not want to address all of them. And it may feel overwhelming, but you just got to go at it and be like, that.
Yeah.
Why aren't we here? Like, I'm not judging you that you're not here. You know what I mean? With all the love and respect, why aren't we here?
Yeah.
And I will sit in the quiet, in the space, in the contemplation for weeks if I have to be like, why are we not here?
right?
It's why people keep coming back. Like sometimes, they need someone to put them in that, to remind them of that, to hold that mirror. Yeah. So much of what we do is also just being like, what do you see here?
Yeah.
But I was just kind of going on, like we were talking about postpartum. I think that hormonal shift is one of the things that happens
Yeah.
in that perimenopause state. And then, especially like as women, we're really shifting how society sees us, right? Like that identity is happening again. That shift is happening again. And even,
Yeah.
if you're, you have the purpose, you have all the things underlying, but there's this
Yeah.
external thing that's now saying like you kind of hold less value in terms of your like sex appeal, in terms of your just our willingness to listen. I heard I use emojis wrong now. um, I just use them.
Use emojis. Whenever I think of that, I think of my mother-in-law uses the like hugging emoji as like excited. And I always, whenever I see it, I'm always like, oh my gosh, that's not what that means.
Yeah, there's definitely like generational emoji use, and you have to know who you're
Yeah.
talking to know how to interpret it. But that can play this really big piece as well, with that shift in your identity and how you handle
Yeah.
that. I mean, amongst all the other things that are changing as well.
Yeah, totally. And so then with practice now, with all of those things, all of those experiences, all of those kids, now I'm still like the most amount of respect for someone who can have 4 kids. But with all of those pieces, where does that take you in practice? Like, what are the things you love doing in practice and why? Like, what gets you going about those things?
Yeah, so it was kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, how my health has been quite good, thankfully. I feel very blessed for that. But something that like I 100% will go through, and you know, I know you've talked about peri chaos and this whole hormonal transition, definitely feel that change, is menopause. Like 100% of women will go through menopause. And I just have been finding like the conversations that I am finding myself in, just in my world, is people just being like, what is happening? And I'm having more and more of these conversations. So it's kind of just coming to me. And so it's something that I want to make sure that I'm really well versed in. I have a deep understanding for the changes that happen, for the treatments that we can do, and all of
Yeah.
the other factors in health that are also associated with it. So I think that there's so much change that we can do in terms of empowerment, like literally just education. And there's
Totally.
so much we can do in terms of treatments like supplements or diet or hormone therapy if it comes to that. And so,
Botox.
just we can help you feel better really quickly. Just,
We have a whole episode on that with Dasha that's going to be in this series. But Ashley and I, when I was in Vancouver, we were hanging out and we were talking about that and just how when everything else in your body feels like it's changing, sometimes you just want something to stay the same, and that's not such a bad thing. Yeah, I know it's such an important perspective, I think, to look at things from multiple different directions, right? As someone who has a forehead that moves a lot and traumatizes everyone on our team as I like give them eyebrows. Within that, there's no one size fits all approach. And I think that's such an important conversation because we do really have to address all of the factors, including how someone feels and their identity and all of those things. So let's dive in. So peri-chaos, some of you will have heard me talk about it. It's that beautiful shit show between 37 and 42 where you feel like you're in perimenopause and you're not. And one of the things that I think is so important to understand about this period is that we are now seeing more people go through premature menopause than we ever have before. Please do see your doctor. Please do not accept you're normal as an answer. Please do not accept you're getting older as an answer. Get your FSH, LH, and estradiol tested on day 3 or 4 of your cycle. Okay, set, done. Then peri-chaos is when you go do that and there is nothing wrong. Your FSH, LH, and estradiol look perfectly normal on day 3 of your cycle, but you still feel like crap. So that's the moment in time where our blood sugar regulation and inflammation and our stress response is interacting with changes in our hormones and interacting with how our brain perceives those hormone changes. So that is a completely modifiable period of life where we can change inflammation, we can support stress hormones and adequacy, we can support blood sugar, and we can make you feel better. Like, it is not a destiny. You can absolutely embrace that period of life. That 42 to 52, that is perimenopause. That is when your brain has started to identify less follicles and your brain has started to yell at your ovaries to pump out more eggs, right? That is an oversimplification, but that is the window of time where we are seeing notable lab changes. We are seeing dramatic fluctuations in hormones and the insulin, the inflammation, the blood sugar issues, and the lack of stress resilience. So it's this double whammy period, which has huge impacts on every aspect of your body, including your brain.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of these women come, and at least like I'm seeing people being like, I'm in perimenopause, but I feel like people are coming in thinking, in that peri-chaos window, and they're like, I'm in perimenopause, I need progesterone. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe let's take a look. But it seems that because we're talking about it so much more, which is the best, now we're getting that kind of self-diagnosis that's happening. And so I think that's a really important thing to distinguish, is that difference. And then
Yeah.
also getting that testing done for the blood sugar, looking at your
Yeah.
thyroid, looking at your liver health, looking at, your gut health, and being like, let's get you settled in these areas. And so
Yeah.
when those hormones start fluctuating, we can see that you're able to respond so much better, and we
Yeah.
can potentially be pushing that past 42, right? We're not in those
Yeah.
full symptoms that we then see with menopause, like the hot flashes and the night sweats, the significant brain fog and memory loss, and potentially like joint and muscle pain, these
Yeah.
things that can happen. So I think that addressing it in that window, if you can come in sooner and
Yeah.
start to look at, like, it's not just natural aging. There are some things your body is sort of losing that resiliency that you
Yeah.
used to feel. I think I like that, as it's not a death sentence. You're not just old now, but really addressing
So
it.
I heard you said resiliency, and it's a word that's used a lot these days, but resilience is how long it takes you to get back to the behaviors, the actions, the day-to-day living, and the day-to-day feeling that you had before. I think sometimes we look at resilience, which it is in small moments. It's like, how quickly do you get back to baseline after you have a stress? But we don't consider the fact that even if you have a stressor and then you get back to it and you feel better, if your behaviors on a day-to-day basis are also changing, meaning you have joint pain, so you go on less walks, you don't go to the gym, you may mentally, emotionally be able to handle a stressor, getting in a fight with your partner. You know what I mean? Like, I always use the example of someone almost hitting your car. You may be able to come back to feeling normal, but if on a day to day you have changed what you can and can't do with your body, how much energy you have, how many meetings you can sit in and remember, if you have like this sophisticated note system to not drop life, you have lost resilience. And it was just such a huge moment for me, because I'm like, when we define it that way, when we define it as like, here's how I feel at my best, and here's all the shit I have to do on a day to now change how I feel and slowly move that marker of like, well, I have to work out less to feel my best. I have to sleep 10 hours now to feel my best. I can't see this person or do this. If we're constantly moving what we can do to feel good, we need to change right? But we don't look at that as resilience in society right now. It's something that was really a huge aha moment for me. And it was on a business podcast of all things. But I was like, that is such an accurate definition of like, how quick do you change your routine before you change your health? Do you modify the things you love before you're willing, able, and interested in going looking for the issue, going investigating the blood work, making the changes you need to make? So, yeah, just if that lands for anyone, it was such a big thing. And when we talk about resilience in this window, I can tell you many of my friends are in that category right now, right? They're in that peri-chaos category where I'm saying to them, hey, let's go do this or let's do this. And it's like, oh, I can't. You know what I mean? We always joke like you roll over and you've somehow thrown out your shoulder. You're like, I mean, like it's like sleeping is like a contact sport now. You know what I mean? Like can't go to Pilates today. I farted and I threw out my back. Like, like when you're at that phase, like you lost resilience. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, come in. Let us help you, right?
Yeah.
But we don't look at it.
Yeah. Or I need 4 hours of Netflix every night in order to
Yes.
like feel like the world isn't just overwhelming
Yes.
me. Like I know I can't go out and see friends because it's too stimulating. It's like, okay, it's not necessarily that you need
Yes.
more rest, but we've got to dig a bit deeper. Is this sort of maybe hormones in general, which
Yeah.
as we've discussed can have to do with a lot of different factors, mitochondrial health being that, if we're looking at
Yeah.
an across the board thing, or is this a true, like a decrease in estrogen, decrease in progesterone, because just the importance of estrogen
Yeah.
on our neurological health is, I think it's not talked about as much,
Yeah.
right? Like we know that, oh yeah, like brain fog, cognitive change, menopause, but it's like, no, there's a strong reason why.
And you just said, right? You're like, oh yeah, we know like cognitive change, can't remember why you entered a room, can't remember someone's name, brain fog. That's just menopause. Most of my patients don't know that.
Mm.
They're like, I'm good. They come in, they're like, menopause, like perimenopause has been a breeze for me. It's been so great. I had no hot flashes, no night sweats, slept like a baby. Everything's great. Vagina's still working, kicking along, feeling good there. I'm like, okay, cool. And then they're like, but my joints hurt like crazy and I can't think. And I want to be diagnosed with ADHD. And so they're doing all the internet online self-assessments that say, like, do you show up early or do you show up late? You must have ADHD. Let's do a little bit more professional work than that. But I think it's not to discredit the symptoms, but there's so many things that we don't know or that are being talked about inappropriately right now. Even there was just a very large menopause feature that was so amazing. And so many brilliant people were on that, highlighting their expertise and talking to Oprah and all of these things. And it was so wonderful. And I'm sitting there listening. And then I heard them say new onset ADHD. And I was like, I can't, because
Mhm.
you can't have like the diagnostic criteria. The diagnostic criteria means that you cannot have new onset ADHD in perimenopause. You have to have symptoms before the age of 12. That doesn't mean we don't treat it. That doesn't mean we don't explore it. But it probably means that you don't need, at least you do not need high doses of a stimulant medication, right? But what I'm seeing is people are going in, getting a diagnosis from an online doctor who asks nothing about childhood, just look at their current symptoms and give them higher and higher doses of these stimulant medications. And then they're having heart palpitations, night sweats, they're not sleeping, they feel awful, they're gaining weight, they can't, like, they're not themselves, they're snapping at their family, their friends, their kids, and then they're told, oh, now it's menopause, right? And Anyways, I could get into it, but before we go all the way down that hole, which is clearly one that I am very passionate about, this is not me saying medications are not helpful. They can be. But as you said, Ashley, like estrogen is upwards of 40 to 50% of the battle here. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what are some of these symptoms people can experience when they are on the estrogen roller coaster. So they are in perimenopause, they're in menopause, they're on that downward spiral, the up and down roller coaster, going down spiral of estrogen. Walk us through that.
Well, in the perimenopause period, you can have, like, what I think is interesting is it's not just a straight shot down. You can have these fluctuations that take you kind of a little bit higher and then kind of crashing lower. And so you can have these symptoms of like a higher estrogen, or you can have these symptoms of low estrogen. Turns out a lot of them overlap, but some big ones we've already discussed, like that you can have new onset pain, you can have changes to your libido, you can have typically lower, you can have, those night sweats or
Mhm.
insomnia or some cognitive changes like anxiety. These, you feel you haven't had anxiety before. You can notice that it's new onset, or if you've had it, it can get worse. You can
Mhm.
notice gut changes even with like bloating. That's a
Yeah.
big thing that can change in that time as well. It's a little bit of this chicken and an egg thing too, where these decreases in estrogen can lead to changes in the gut. But we
Yeah.
actually have an ability to make some estrogen in the gut. And so those changes then decreases the estrogen even more as we get to
Mhm.
that state. But you might notice new digestive symptoms as well, which one doesn't typically think of when we're thinking about that estrogen changing. And just even those mood swings of like high to low mood, and skin changes, as we talked about before. So just
Yeah.
changes to the dryness of the skin. So not just like increased wrinkles, but even just with it, the texture can
Mhm.
change. And then things like spider veins or varicose veins as
Yeah.
well. And then changes to hair. So some like thinning or loss as
Mhm.
well. So, and then I think weight as well can make a difference too.
Yeah.
So just so you can either be gaining weight or not able to lose weight in the same way you could before.
Yeah, I was talking to a patient the other day, and she, in 2.5 years, has gained 40 pounds, exercising more and eating less. And she's 50 right now. So she's in
Right.
that latter half, the late stage of perimenopause, heading into menopause. And it's just like, it just seems unfair. And one of the things that I think is really important is what I always say is our brain is always sampling for consistency. What we call in the physiology world homeostasis, right? The body has decided a point that it always wants to come back to. Some people notice this with their weight. They just cannot get less than 172 pounds. They will do everything in the world to lose it and then they will regain it. But it doesn't matter if they overeat for a weekend or a week, it never goes above. You know what I mean? Like it always will come back to that line. That's your homeostatic point. For some people, that's related to their energy. For there's all of these things. But the same is true with our hormones. Our body wants to swing back and forth and find this cadence. But when we have these huge swings, they are as symptomatic for our body as no hormones because we're in this state where we're overcorrecting. We're dedicating a ton of our energy, time, and brain to this overcorrection. And so, this is part of why we don't do a ton of testing for estrogen in the second half of the cycle, right? Because you can see wild swings in perimenopause, like wild swings. And this is why we are always taking all of our labs with a grain of salt because you're looking at one point versus rapid changes. But it's really important that even if you are in a situation where you're told your estrogen is normal on testing, and therefore you feel like this conversation, you're like, oh, well, I don't have high or low estradiol. So this must not be the cause. That one marker of normal isn't necessarily telling us the whole story. So I think it's a really important point, because I can't tell you the number of times I have patients coming in and they're like, oh yeah, well, here's my labs, they're normal. And I'm like, okay, for that one split second of a moment, congratulations. Like, did you feel normal then? Did you feel great? Like, congratulations. But there's a whole bigger story to this, which I think is important to highlight too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In this period of time, I always tell my patients, specifically when we're doing maybe a hormone replacement therapy, is like, I'm not treating your labs. Your labs are there for safety, to make sure that
Yeah,
we're in a range that's still safe for your body. We're really looking at your symptoms and using those as the measurement in terms of how you're doing. And
totally.
symptoms being, just the things that they came in with. So could be a number of the things that we talked about.
Today's episode is brought to you by none other than Advanced Women's Health. If you are interested in diving in deeper to your health, if you are finally ready to feel like yourself, and you are finally over hearing everything's normal, everything's fine, and you want a deeper dive into your healthcare, then we are here to help you. We are currently helping patients in British Columbia and Ontario, Canada. But don't worry, if you're in another province, still reach out, get added to the wait list as we expand coast to coast. We cannot wait to work with you. Check out the show notes for more information on how to get started.
So let's dive in a little bit deeper to estrogen and cognitive health. What are some of those connections that you're seeing in practice with the brain, and how people are focusing, struggling at any point in life? We're calling this perimenopause, but to be clear, we see people with focus, attention, executive function challenges the week before their period. So this does not have to just be perimenopause. This could be at any point in life. But what are some of those changes you're seeing that make you be like, is this hormonally driven
Mhm.
or estradiol driven?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think is interesting is that estrogen is used in the brain for energy utilization. So that's something that this is more, I think, like focused in that perimenopause menopausal state, where we see the type of energy that is used in the brain shifts in that time. And so we'll have, like, it uses more of the ketones for energy as opposed to sugar. And if we have some of that insulin resistance, if we're having that, it's harder for us to switch our energy fuel, can see that fatigue in your brain. So if people are coming to me with like this, like, I'm good for like half a day, and then it's just like, I can't make a decision. I need people to just leave me alone. I just feel this brain fog, and they notice that it's like shifting in a day. It's like, okay. Or if it really changes with meals, or then it's like, okay, that might be a piece. And then just even it in estrogen, like, so intricately has to do with neurotransmitters. Like, so it enhances like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and those are so critical for executive function. So just seeing that shift in executive function in those like
Yeah.
periods of lower estrogen. So before your period, and you
Mhm.
notice that big shift to, again, just like inability to focus. Okay.
So dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, these are chemicals that circulate in our brain that activate different aspects of our health. So dopamine is very associated with reward, right? It's the hit you get when you eat a high fat, high sugar food. It's that feeling of reward. It's the feeling of reward you get when you check a box on your to do list, when you feel like you take a task to completion, right? It's the feeling of reward we get when we move through something challenging. And we know that when you're not getting that signal, that dopamine, that reward signal, is so critical to motivation and direction and drive and consistency and self confidence. Because if you're not getting that feeling when you check the box, like I use check boxers because so many of my patients will write like these massive to do lists. That's just how people are getting that motivational hit to move forward, right? Whereas epinephrine, norepinephrine, those things, like that has a lot to do with focus, your ability to stay on task, your ability to have those signals allow you to move fluidly from one thought to another, allow you to tone out some of the crazy distractions and the thoughts that are coming in. They're very involved in alertness and that feeling that a lot of people get when that in the zone, right? That feeling of just being productive. And that's where that combination of dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine come in, is when we're like, oh, okay, like you're accomplishing something, you're focused, you're getting a reward, your memory's in place, like all of those things come through.
Yeah, that's helpful to put those into the categories because I think we hear about those a lot. And so when estrogen goes down, we see changes to those neurotransmitters. So, people that have certain mental health issues like depression, anxiety, ADHD, we can see that it
Mhm.
can get a lot worse before your period.
It's something that we need to dive into in deeper detail because it is, if you don't have estrogen, right, we are really controlling the whole conversation. I always say, like, I use this example, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but it makes sense in my brain, so we try and work with it. Estrogen is like the gas tank, right? So it is the potential for energy. It's the potential for your body to hold space and hold memory and hold all those things. Mitochondria, the energy powerhouse of the cell, that is the actual gas, right? But it is really this whole process of like what's controlling the engine, the consistency of hormones. It's all of these things that's allowing us to use that energy and move that all forward. So you need each of those pieces. Otherwise, you're stuck with like some good energy and a broken gas tank and your engine that's not going to take you anywhere. And so we can't look at these things in isolation. We have to look at them together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So woman comes into your office. She is 48, feels like she constantly forget her train of thought, is embarrassed to show up in meetings because she never can rely on her memory or her ability to get words out. She feels like scattered. She's struggling to keep herself organized, on task, focused. She's just, again, not feeling like herself in her body. She's starting to get some sleep disturbances. She's starting to get some hot flashes. Her period is getting a little bit longer, some months shorter, other months. What are you doing? Like, how are you exploring what you need to assess to support her? And what are some of our different treatment concepts that we're going through?
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that. I'm just like, okay, well, I have so many ideas, and so like I always have to work on like, okay, good, let's slow it down. But I'm always looking at some of the big things that can impact that. So obviously, we're having some hormonal shifts there, and
Mhm.
so we're exploring the conversation of potentially replacing some of those hormones for her. But
Yep.
I don't ever do that in an isolation for someone if that's experiencing a lot of cognitive shifts in that time. I would want to just confirm, maybe do an assessment of an ADHD and just see
Yep.
if that's something that is in her history. Like you said, that's something we need to make sure that is present in childhood in some form, but it can present itself much more strongly in that
Yeah.
perimenopause time. So
Mhm.
it would be something to explore. And sometimes treating that in that window can be incredibly helpful for
Totally.
women. But again, we're looking at those foundations. So, blood sugar and insulin control. I definitely looking at inflammation. Estrogen is
Mhm.
so critical in those inflammatory pathways in the body as well. So, it
Yeah.
can be again that kind of chicken and an egg thing where estrogen's affecting inflammation, but then inflammation comes back and can affect estrogen. So wanting to get a handle
Totally.
on that, and then looking at liver and gallbladder bile support, that type of thing. And then, of course, like digestion and gut health. And so,
Mhm.
whether that's through food and just like stabilizing blood sugar, or whether that's through addressing if there's any like microbial issues that are going on, making sure she's getting rid of everything that's coming in. That's always very
Making sure she's
important.
not full of shit.
Yep. But in this case, too, just
Yeah.
really supporting that stress response. So everybody
Yeah.
has different things that they're capable of. But I think even you referred to this further. So there's this external stress that she's getting from her meetings, from her family, from her relationships, from
Mhm.
society. What are the tariffs going to do tomorrow? And she's got it all, but that internal stress that can happen too. So whether it's like
Yeah.
blood sugar dysregulation, this
Yeah.
hormonal fluctuations, that's causing this imbalance internally. And so I call it like a bit of a stress sandwich where you have this
Yeah.
external and internal. And so addressing that through lifestyle things like I'm always getting my patients to just take a few minutes out of the day and do some
Yeah.
deep belly breaths, like at a minimum, just to regulate. And then through those
Mm.
external things like nervine herbs
Yeah.
as well. I also am a fan of some cold water therapy. So if you're willing to, I always present that can
Yeah.
be an absolute game changer for cognitive health and just for like focus and attention.
Our group is big into education, as I don't think it shocks anyone, but we had DBT, I think it's dialectical behavioral therapy therapists on today. And they were just educating on using DBT in postpartum health and in PMDD. But I was sitting there and I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of what they're talking about very much applies to menopause and perimenopause as well, where there's these rapid fluctuations and using behaviors like cold water therapy to break out of a pattern and
Mhm.
like break out of a loop. Because especially when you're sitting there, it is so easy to be in a long meeting or be in the middle of a long day where you have a repetitive task. You've forgotten two names already. You're just spinning out in your head because you're like, oh my God, what's next? Am I going to remember this thing? How am I going to get everything done? But everyone has the availability to go to the washroom and put your hands in really cold water, to go into the kitchen sink at the office and hold two ice cubes for 30 seconds. That is more challenging than you would think, right? Everyone has the ability, if you don't wear a lot of makeup like me, to splash your face with freezing cold water, right? To break that state, to accept the next moment as a new moment. And I think is cold water therapy I love because you feel calm afterwards because you get the dopamine hit, you get the epinephrine, norepinephrine, you get it
Yeah.
all. But it's also really helpful because it helps your body to one, change state, and two, to adjust to stressors and teach your body that you can handle shit. And that is something I find so valuable. So you get to do it in the ocean. I get to pay money to put my butt in a cold tub, but still immensely valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a quick, if you're struggling to, like movement is a huge one as well. So, depending on the cognitive concerns that we have, like just making sure that movement is such a big part of it, especially through that, through this time, if your joints are sore and you're exhausted, you're not sleeping, like then you're not moving as well usually. And so finding ways to bring that energy up so that we can then make sure that you're getting that movement in, then that can help then with the focus and making sure that you can perform, cognitively at work and all of the demands that you have as a 48-year-old woman. It's a lot.
Absolutely. No, that's super helpful. I think it's really important for people to understand because it's something I'm seeing right now. So, if you look at most rapidly growing industries that what we call private equity or large conglomerates of people and or banks and or financial people who have money, if you look at what they want to invest in health, it's menopause right now
Mhm.
because women who are perimenopausal and menopausal are at a stage in their career where their finances are stable. Oftentimes, their kids are moving towards independence or are independent. They have money to spend on themselves and they have symptoms. And so you will see a ton of advertising dollars dedicated to these women. And so few of them are doing it holistically. Put a patch on your ass, put a cream on your face, you know what I mean? And like move forward. And I love hormone replacement therapy for the right person, but it's so much more holistic and sophisticated than that. And I think we're in this place right now where we're almost like running a risk of oversimplifying it. We're coming out of a period of time. There was the Women's Health Initiative trial, which is the trial that happened however many years ago now, 20,
25.
that essentially said 25, yeah, that essentially said hormones are bad for you, dangerous, going to cause cancer, clots, and you're going to die. And so everyone stopped using them. And now we're reanalyzing those trials. We're looking at them saying, you know what? No, that's not necessarily the case with all hormones, all forms, all people. But we're almost embracing them too much to the point that we're like, here's the solution. Like you jab Ozempic in your body and you put your HRT patch on and your life is going to be wonderful. But it's so much more than that. And I think our society loves a pendulum. We always swing too far. That's like, but it never changes. We're always going to swing to no hormones. So now we're in the swing back to only hormones. And in a few years from now, we'll find that middle ground again where we're like, this is how to use hormones. But I think in the meantime, while the rest of society wants to fluctuate back and forth, we'll be here.
Yeah.
Using hormones appropriately in the context of all of the other interventions going to help you get healthy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like as naturopathic doctors, at least in BC, we can prescribe some hormones. And so we've been here for a while and we see conventional, like kind of the medical system is kind of getting there, but not to throw anyone in our profession under the bus. But I think that there's a tidal wave of culture saying like hormones will solve all your problems. We're like, come here, I got your hormones. And it's like, and maybe we're forgetting, you still, by addressing these other things, we're really setting you up, not just for like, oh, your hot sweats, your night hot sweats. Yeah. Hot flashes are
hot
gone.
sweats. I have patients say that all the time. They're like, I've got hot sweats, I've got cold sweats, I've got thigh sweats, I've got butt sweats, I've got back sweats. So yeah,
and it smells different now. It didn't used to.
Yeah.
Like that can change. But it's like, yes, okay, the hormones might solve that, but like, let's get you to a place where I think you talk about this in other podcasts, but your bone health is at a place where you can not have a fracture when you get older, and your cardiovascular health and your neurological health, and just like, let's help set you up for the next 40 years. And so that's what we're doing.
That's what we should pitch to the CAND. So there's a Canadian Association of Naturopathic Doctors. That should be their tagline. We've been here for a while.
Yes. We've been saying this.
Everyone else is swinging the pendulum. We've been here.
Remember the microbiome? You were all talking about that now? We've been talking about it for 30 years.
Liver detoxes. Yeah, now we know. Yeah, I know. It's so fascinating. Well, this was such a beautiful conversation. I think it's going to help so many people. And so I would love for you to wrap up. There's someone on the other end of this listening. They're sitting there. They're like, this is me. My brain is gone. I do not feel like myself. My neurological health is off. My blood sugar's off. Where do they start other than booking with you? We will give them that information. But what would you say? Because part of the hardest part when you're cognitively overwhelmed is the first step. So what is that first step?
Right. Well, not to sound like TikTok.
Put estrogen on your
I think that like the simplest things is that you can do. Obviously, seeing a naturopathic doctor is very smart because it can just take away that cognitive burden of like, what can I do? They take it and they say, do these 3 things, then come back to me and we will do these 3 things. And so I think that's a very good place to go. But if you can't access that right now for whatever reason, I would say the best place to start is by looking at and be like, what am I having for breakfast? Am I having some cereal and half a muffin, or a bagel, something like, look at that and be like, let's start with a protein rich, savory breakfast, that has low in carbs. Like,
so the reason I'm laughing is because Ashley's husband owns a company that sells meat and sausages.
I told you I was plugging
that earlier, that if she doesn't know what to say, we'll just deviate and start talking about sausages. We're here. Like, we made it in.
And, it's just every conversation comes back to sausage. I think that's the takeaway. But I do.
We love them, we hate them, we eat them, we spit them out.
Meal timing and what you eat can be so hugely important. And if that feels overwhelming, it's like, don't snack.
Yeah.
Build your meals around protein and vegetables and have at
Mhm.
least a 12-hour fast at night. And like, if you can just focus on that, if that's a shift for you, that will make such a huge difference in how your energy
Absolutely.
feels throughout the day and start to even make those shifts in blood sugar and inflammation. And so before you even take anything or do anything, kind of starting there can make a big difference, and then move your freaking body too,
Yeah.
just to go for a walk or get outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Absolutely.
will keep adding things, so I need to just stop. You asked me to keep it simple, so I'm going to.
But no, I think it is such a big thing as much as we joke, like the more research we get, the more we know what adequate protein looks like for so many people. And we do not need to go super high protein. This is not what I'm talking about. But
No.
we do need to be in a camp where we're getting adequacy. And so many people are not even doing that. And like you said, they're hoovering a muffin, running out the door with their triple sweet coffee and wondering why 10, 11, 12 o'clock their brain doesn't work. And then they eat food they don't want by 3 o'clock and start the cycle again the next day. So yeah, it's such a big thing. Well, thank you, Ashley, for coming on. We always have fun on this podcast, but it was so beautiful to, I think for me, like one of my huge values is bringing light and fun to really challenging topics. So for anyone who's on the other side of this, just know we're here with you. We see a version of you every day across the clinic. Like there's so many people that are struggling, and we are 100% here to help. So thank you so much for coming on and chatting about this subject with me. And I cannot wait to talk to you guys all next week. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you had as much fun as we did. And if you loved today's episode, share it with a friend and leave us a review. That is how we spread this message, and that is how we are going to revolutionize healthcare in Canada for women. Have a beautiful day and be well.